Have you ever looked at the competition and wondered how to turn them into your friend instead of your enemy? What does it take to build a real relationship in business, even in a high pressure situation? What do you do when the FBI knocks at your door? This is Driven to Win, the show that helps you, the entrepreneur who wants to win in all areas and isn't afraid to do the work to get there. I'm your host, Chaz Wolfe. My mission on this show is to help driven entrepreneurs grow and win in all areas. Today, I welcome Jeremy Delk. He's a serial entrepreneur, investor, and speaker. This guy has got a unique ability to win in tough negotiations. He's built several multi-million-dollar empires in different industries, and he's even come face-to-face with the FBI. Jeremy's journey is a testament to the idea that you are not done until you say so. In this episode, Jeremy shares his tips on how to negotiate like a pro, and he tells us the story of turning down a $600 million offer for his business right before he gets raided by the FBI. And he gives us a parenting hack that he wants every entrepreneur to steal from him. So if you want to learn how to win in business by building authentic connections and mastering the art of negotiation, just keep on watching. You have this immense ability to communicate, negotiate. We can maybe throw in some other terms there, but specifically with your competitors, people
Yeah.
who might be seen as competitors, but you have this way about you time and time again through your story where you've turned competitors into allies or even alliances. Talk about that. Talk about negotiation and communication specifically, but with that particular lane.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just a firm believer that, people do business with people, right? And I don't care what business or industry you're in or at what level. And I think part of that started for me, like I went to school and got good grades and did all that stuff in college, but I I don't know that I've really applied much. I own hotels and stuff now and different business stuff, but I don't know that I've applied a ton, like, because I didn't go to school for a trade. I wasn't a doctor, lawyer, engineer. But
Right.
what I learned in college is I was so curious. I grew up in this small town in Bardstown, Kentucky, and there just diversity wasn't there. I mean, it was, which I wasn't really redneck, but like just a country town. We had a small African American population, and that was really it. So to go to school in Providence and meet people from Europe and Asia and just different socioeconomic backgrounds, that curiosity that's probably what drives me in business is that curiosity of just meeting people and kind of talking and being able to relate. I think that's what I pride myself in being able to do because it's genuine. I can talk to, the guy that's taking out trash. I just left a job site that we're doing a commercial conversion to residential downtown. And one of the guys, I mean, he's the nicest guy ever. And I always make sure to say, hi, how's it going, buddy? Kind of going through. And I
Right.
can, text two or three of my billionaire friends and have that same rapport. And I'm just who I am. And I'm just authentic and kind of you either maybe I'm a little polarizing. You either like me or don't like me. I think it's binary. But I found that, when negotiating or when doing something, if you hear everyone here's like a win-win or, it's got to be,
Sure.
no one's happy with a good deal, right? That neither side's really happy. I've always tried to negotiate from the other side of the table and
Yeah.
really kind of genuinely understand like what's important for Chaz and also asking that because so many times you go through like we had I can this one's apparent right now. Like we're doing it was a commercial building, law firm, couple tenants, and we were happy to keep some where they were happy to go, but we're converting the building to residential. And I'm the nicest guy until I'm pushed. And these guys, took it legal and I just went nuclear on them. And all of a sudden now they've come to the realization, like, you know what? It's probably much easier just talking to Jeremy. And I'm like, yeah, like let's just kind of resolve it. And it's resolved itself.
Yeah.
Wasted some couple hundred grand in lawyers. So you have to let people go at their own pace. But if you
Yeah.
can be genuine and come in and approach it like what's in it for you and what's important to you, and then put your cards on the table, you get to a result much quicker and people appreciate it. And also like some deals aren't meant to happen, right? You're never going to work out. And hey, if you just don't align, well, that's okay. At least we know where it
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
communication is the key to everything. Business, personal, relationships, friendships, etc.
Yeah. Why do you think that there is, or maybe a better question would be, what have you developed to be able to have that perspective of niceness, as you called it? I'm the nicest guy until pushed, where
Yeah.
you can have that pleasing personality where you're really genuine and curious until where you're like, if we got, if you're gonna go, lawyers on me, then I'm going to go nuclear. Before that happened, that was all skill. How
Yeah.
did you get that? What would you recommend to the listeners?
Well, I mean, I think it just goes back to being personal, right? I mean, I take my word at like my word, right? I mean, if I tell you I'm going to do something and it works out bad for me, I'm still going to do the deal, right? Because my reputation is too important to me to kind of to break that. So if you really are coming in it from you know a holistic, genuine approach,
Yeah.
you're putting yourself out there. When you kind of go nuclear is when you feel like, hey, I've made my best effort and you don't want to do it. Well, then okay, then we can agree to disagree and then just let it go a different path.
What would you say that, specifically around the, competitors or people that maybe are on the other side of the fence of the negotiation, or again, maybe an enemy of sorts. But again, you just have like a little bit of a history of kind of turning those into like really great leverage points for yourself.
If you would have started out and I said, I'm going to go into building materials to making windows in Europe to regenerative medicine company there's no straight line to it. But
Right.
each one of those had a building block, right? And where I took a little bit of skill and then applied it to that different one. So when I said like business is business and people do business with people, that's industry agnostic, right? People have the same pieces, whether they're, if in the regenerative medicine space, this was cutting edge new things. So while we may be competitors, like we had a big suit with this when that was in the Medimed days with VetStem, this whole patent fight and litigation. And again, I would remember I was in federal court in San Diego with this patent infringement case that was never going to hold water. We've already got six figures in this. And I was frustrated, but we never talked. And I kind of, saw him in the hallway. We're in mediation. His name's Bob Harmon, the CEO of VetStem, San Diego based company. And I said, listen, and I was bluffing. I said, I've got $5 million in an extra war chest, just in legal, that I'll fucking just burn up. In legal, I will undercut your price. I'll just do whatever because I'm stupid I'll go through there. But here's the reality. We are a lot more alike than we are different. Merck and Pfizer are not fighting. They're going through and trying to get their piece of the pie, but they're not saying non-steroidal anti-inflammatories are bad. They're just saying like they're going through like, hey, buy my brand because it's this packaging or this thing, and they're going after and trying to get a market share.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is using resources to fight each other in a market that wasn't built. So, and it's just true. I mean, it helps when your argument or the fact pattern is actually true. And then if you can see that, and it just removes the emotion, put the other person's perspective on there and really understand like what is their driving piece? Like why are we here and what is it? And then if you can eliminate it, great, and come together or kind of go through. And if not, at least you have a mutual respect, right? Like wouldn't the 150 grand you spent and I spent do better in our business as opposed to going to these lawyers? And that's kind of the point. Like, yeah, it will. And every single time, it's better to not go for the lawyers. I mean, lawyers are great to mess up deals and, bring this false sense of value on.
Exactly. You kind of started the conversation here around some of the metavet stuff and how some of that went south. But what my first question on that was kind of along the same lines of negotiation and your ability to communicate. You had like a $600 million evaluation on that tailor-made business.
Yeah.
How do you think the skill set that we just got done talking about, your ability to negotiate and or kind of not play both sides of the fence, but be able to hear, communicate, be curious. How did that play into that evaluation? Do you think?
Well, I mean, we were in a really good place. So anytime you can negotiate from a position of power, it's a huge advantage. It was that mission driven goal that was bigger than me. That was
Sure.
the driving force. On the human side with TaylorMade, it was a rocket ship. I mean, we were the first ones that introduced, and now it's mainstream. I mean, Ozempic, which is like the biggest blockbuster drug right now, that's a peptide. We were doing that, 8 years ago before off label kind of going through. So peptides, we were the kind of group that brought it to this country. And we were just on a, rocket ship to the moon, and our growth over time was massive. I owned it with a partner, 50-50. And I was making, yeah, I don't know, maybe close to $1 million a month personally. Like I've got, three, 1 billionaire friend I would consider a really good friend, two acquaintances. And I can tell you, Chaz, like we didn't live much different, right? I mean, that's an obscene amount of money to, it's hard to spend. It's, I mean, you're not,
Yeah.
you don't need for anything. You have all the things taken care of and it's great. So for
Yeah.
me, what the piece, so they contacted us unsolicitedly. We weren't in a process. And I literally just told the guy like, hey, I'm probably going to be pretty hard to deal with. I'm a nice guy, but I'm going to be pretty tough. And if it's not like a pretty material 9-figure number, don't even waste your time. He's like, no, we got like, a couple billion to deploy and we've done 2 acquisitions and we're able to go. So that's how the conversation started. So I set the precedent there, which is great.
Yep.
Someone comes to you and you've already pushed them away. They want
Yep.
me more and it just kind of goes through.
Yeah.
And we went through that whole process. The I'm asked this all the time because obviously you know the story. I sold it for a lot less than 600 million. And like I'm always asked, like, would you do it again? And the answer, yeah, 100% of the time, because for me, the decision to do it was arrogant, right? But I don't know. I've got the company that we've got now. I think that's my next kind of play that, build $1 billion business. But it's very rare air, right? To be able to build $1 billion company. And at that time, that's all that was, I thought that was my only shot on goal to do it.
Right.
So I was confident, like if we've just tripled year over year, if they're willing to pay me 600 now, they're going to pay me 1 billion next year. And if they don't, who cares? Like, my life was not going to
Yeah.
change
Right.
one way or the other. Like this wasn't some negative earnings growth thing where we were going to get a big liquidity
Right.
event. So those are always easier to be a super smart guy when you're in that position of power. And yeah.
Well, spoiler alert on that is that obviously your life did change,
Oh yeah. Actually.
drastically, within a very short period of time there. Give us just a smidge of that story. You've kind of hinted at it a couple times, but give us a little bit of that story in it, which obviously led you down, but then eventually, back up.
Yeah, man. So we turned down that offer for that money. And then I don't remember the timeline. Some things you try to block out, but less than a week or two later, I was at the gym and I got calls from my office and the FBI had raided our pharmacy and
Crazy.
which is just absolutely nuts. And like freaked out 100 something employees,
Yeah.
took $3 million worth of inventory from us. And, mind you, like we didn't go into this like, half cocked. We had a lot of really good lawyers, a lot of good regulatory folks, massive QA/QC, out of like, I think 4 or 5 million doses, we had like a handful of reactions. And that was like injections, like redness, like a bee sting, like that. I mean, so the safety
Yeah.
profile, and that's usually where these things happen. Like this is all cash pay. Usually you see a healthcare kind of deal go up when you've killed somebody. Like New England Compound is coming pharmacy, like they had meningitis outbreak everywhere that was selling to hospitals and just
Yeah.
insanitary conditions. Like that's usually what you hear. We're like, man, I can get every single A-list celebrity you've ever heard of are patients and friends that will kind of say like we're helping like people. So it's like, what did we
Yeah.
do? And that was tough for I think government to degree. Like, what's the victim story? Like, you need a victim, and there really isn't that piece. It was a perfect fucking storm. I mean, they raided us on the pretense on the Medivet business that I had sold years prior. They took out an equine component and dumped it into this whole racehorse doping story, which I kind of talk a little bit about, like some
Yeah.
nuances to that of like what's doping versus repair, because just
Right.
so not the way the company was visioned, but that's how it kind of got bumped into.
Yeah.
So the narrative I think that they thought was, hey, we were making all of these horse drugs in the pharmacy and gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, it just wasn't the case, right? So they took $3 million worth of stuff, never found anything in equine, nothing there. I never got my 3 million bucks of stuff back.
Oh, wow.
And, we're like, okay. And I remember one of the officers that was there told one of my staff, like, because the staff like freaked out, like, are we gonna have a job tomorrow?
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know if the FBI just raid my office. I don't think you probably do. And I think that, maybe the expectation was that we probably would have shelved it. But again, I had some money. So we just threw in a few more million bucks back in and just picked right back up where we went off and kept serving people. And, you know, I didn't talk about this book. We grew a company from zero to $60 million a year run rate, 2 employees to 150. So we've definitely made some mistakes along that path. And, my previous criminal history was, surmised by speeding tickets in my Ferrari, right? That's my background. I was never indicted, but there's a threat, right? Of like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
peanut going through, like after they figure out, hey, this guy isn't related to the horse stuff. It's nothing to do with that. But the federal government does not miss. They just
Yeah.
don't. And there was, just a ton of discovery. We were being super cooperative, and our regulatory lawyer that we hired before, because and I talk about all of it in detail with compounding pharmacies, but there's, there was a gray area of whether this was eligible to be compounded or ineligible to be compounded, but it had never been enforced. And historically, like in Australia, the enforcement was they just classified them as like class 2 narcotics. So it has to be prescription to get them. Well, we were already getting prescription. So like we just thought like the downside would be a little bit more regulatory, and we'd already kind of solved for that.
Yeah.
But our lawyer kind of said like, hey, they're not going to come at you for that. They're going to get you they're going to get you with something else. And the something else, and again, not to get nauseum, but 503A is a patient specific compound. So if I'm a doctor, I have to write a prescription for Jeremy Delk. I've got to write one for Chaz Wolfe. 503B is like Cuban's cost plus meds, right? That's
Yeah.
a 503B where they're doing like bulk manufacturing.
Sure.
So you don't need an individual script. You can send 20 prescriptions to a doctor and they dispense them there. Well, we had distributed maybe 100 and something doses of methylcobalamin, which is vitamin B12, to a doctor friend in Beverly Hills. So I'm a convicted vitamin B12 salesman.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we kind of took control. And again, there was a lot of stuff that kind of gone through. So I'm not trying to
Yeah.
downplay the seriousness of it, but the emotional piece was wow. Cause like, again, never indicted, but the threats of like, and I don't know I hope everyone can read my book and like how to deal with fucking ready to just, I mean, the amount of pressure that it put
Yeah.
on me was just nuts. But you get a really quick tutorial on crim law, right?
Yeah.
It's if you have a product, cause like, I looked at your bio, you've got a couple of brick and mortar building. What's
Yeah.
your franchises that you have?
Edible Arrangements is the brand.
Okay. So if you happen to do anything wrong with edible arrangements ever, right? And the fruit was, illegal.
Right.
If you ever sent an email, right? Electronic communication about said edible arrangements, that is wire fraud. And then if you ever took $1 from the business and bought like a bottle of Pellegrino and spent any of it, that because they're illicit gains, illicit money is money laundering. So now speeding tickets to never indicted, but the threat of mail fraud, or not mail fraud, money laundering and wire fraud.
Yeah.
So, which are 20-year things. Now they're not really 20 years because like part-time offenders and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
But I had some money that I could either fight or, pay some fines and some penalties and have the certainty. So
Yeah.
uh, it was a very uncertain time for 6 months that I just was very uncomfortable. And I'm like, hey, like I'm happy just to get the fuck out of this thing. And how do we go on?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the Cliff Notes version of
I
it.
want to ask you about, kind of coming out of that. Before I do, you made a comment about just the pressure in that moment,
Yeah.
of whatever that was, them putting it on you. But what it made me think of is obviously just the indictments, however many, 34 or whatever that Donald Trump has been,
Yeah.
pressed on. And I think of the pressure. And so,
Yeah.
like what you just described, and then thinking of his last situation over the last year, regardless of political stance, the pressure has to be just incredibly immense.
It is. And I mean, the pressure, it's just the fear of your freedom being taken from you
Yeah.
is fucking like no other. The threat of not being able to touch your kids at night. Like,
Right.
like there's nothing else. And like one of the billionaires I talked about in the book, but it was the best advice. He's like, Jeremy, you've got some resources. They have all the resources, right?
Yeah.
You need to get out of here with a fucking flesh wound and not a fatal shot. Because so many people like, and it's very easy to be an armchair quarterback. Like, fuck, man, what'd you do? Like, you help people. Like, you can fight this. There's no victim. Like, really fucking easy to say when the
Yep.
gun's not at your head. I highly respect authorities of government and just was, I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
So the pressure kind of was that cooker, and it fucked me up for a while, probably a good, 6 to 9 months. I sold everything that was in like healthcare that was like a supplement business. I was just like, I don't
Done.
want to fucking be in that realm.
Yeah.
And that was like the first time where I felt like I was losing myself a little bit because like, you know what, why am I doing it? And I had, again, we got the houses in the car. We have all the shit. I got a family. Like, why am I doing it? And I just, yeah. So it threw me back. I
Yeah.
sold a lot of stuff for like fire sales. So I didn't have, you know how it is. Like if you hit a certain income threshold, it's really hard to fucking unwind that, right? I mean, you just get comfortable. I remember when I was like making 200 grand a year in my 20s on Wall Street, I was like, I'm basically a billionaire. Now that's fucked. I mean,
Okay.
we're on the
Yeah. How can
streets.
you do that?
Yeah, no. And it hurt, but what I've learned, and that's why I share that story at grave detail. I share the story with a really bad divorce and, a lot of self-help work that I've been doing on myself and counseling is that humans innately are hyper resilient,
Yeah.
but we're also very, smart and programmed to be self-protective.
Yeah.
So why my stories, I mean, I think the closing of my book, like what my life's, what was a line? Something like it's, of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll or something like that. But it makes for a great story, but not a great life.
Right.
And I think that, you know, when you go back and you look at some of these traumas and you look at some of these things, I'm not special. I probably had a lot more extreme things happen, good and bad, right? Super high highs, super low lows. But I always talk when I'm either coaching clients or, speaking on stage is that I'm not special. Like I lost my dad when I was 7. Like we've all experienced loss. We've
Yeah.
all had losses in business and in personal life. And it's always been everyone has had a worse day where this is it. It's the end of it. But now they're listening to your podcast. A month ago that happened, or 6 years ago that happened, or whatever. But humans, because we want to protect ourselves emotionally, we tune those out. And I'm not one for looking back and dwelling, but I look back at that and give myself strength of like, man, look what you come through, right?
Yeah.
I have in my car club, I've got this, quote. I think I stole it from Jesse. I did steal it from Jesse Itzler. I met him out in California. Him and Sarah Blakely were at this war
Mhm.
room. That's when I was in. And I had it because I curse a lot. But, you haven't come this fucking far only to come this fucking far. And
Right.
that is how I live my life, right? Like, hey, let's not make the same mistake twice. Let's kind of go through and go. And that started 20 years ago. I give the correlation, those
Yeah.
two big events. I would have never started Delk Enterprises and had the balls to leave a high paying job on Wall Street where I was making twice as much money as both my mom and my stepdad if I didn't ask myself the question. And the question was, what's the fucking worst can happen? And,
Right.
and there's no way that it's going to be worse than ripping up 2 million bucks in 4 days. So, and I got through that shit and I built myself back. So that's what I kind of talk to in the lesson that hopefully people take away is that don't dwell on it, but remember, like you've gotten through shit. Everyone that's listening has gotten through something hard.
Yeah.
Use that as fuel to give you confidence because this fear of failure, which I have a whole go forever on failure, but this fear is fucking all between your ears, right? That's it. And in most of it is driven around what you think people are going to think. And the reality is no one fucking cares about you. Right? Maybe your mom, maybe your wife, but no one else cares. And your kid, they care about themselves. You'll be the talk of the town. And I mentioned writing the book for my kids. If you look at their legal documents, that's all what's happened, right? But you look at these fucking news articles that are out that kind of were coming out around the time. This is a very small town. I'm like, call my lawyers. I'm like, all right, we doing a press conference. Like, what are we gonna say? And they're like, Delk, you're fucking saying nothing. Like you are
Yeah.
saying you should fuck up, just ignore it. Like, and that was the hardest thing for me
Wow.
because there was some inaccurate things, I guess. Like
Yeah.
just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I wrote the book solely to, one day, like, my kids are gonna, know about this and kind of go through and I at least
Yeah.
want to hear like my piece of it and
Yeah.
go through. And again, and I don't glamorize it at all. I mean, I took whole responsibility then in the book and acknowledge what it is, but it's tough. And I've been very blessed and fortunate because I've I've had a third act, right? And usually when you go through something like this,
It takes you
like
out.
I would be a pharmacist, or I would be I when this happened, I still had other businesses that were kind of going through. So like you mean like so I was able to make decisions that were, I guess, a higher moral ground. Like we I sold the business for $6 million. I had an offer for 12, but they would have just moved the book. So this is March of 2020. So right when COVID was happening. And in Nicholasville, where we talked about this gentleman that you had on before, like I live there, man. Like I'm not gonna like $6 million is not an immaterial amount of money, but I'd fucking move. Like I would have to move. It was not worth me fucking going to a Walmart or fucking to a restaurant and seeing someone that I displaced out of a fucking job
Right.
during a pandemic. And
Yeah.
now sold it to some friends for half the money. And they just, it looks like a $15 million, I've only seen it from the street, but $15 million expansion, and they're growing and still hiring people. So that
Yeah.
is worth fucking way more to me than the money.
Yeah. You said you would maybe rewrite the story of, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What would be the 3 replacement words that you would rewrite the story with?
Good question. I mean, I think um, the first would be, I think, just love, right? Like true, like love, vulnerability, and authenticity. There you go. Just, I think that would be the biggest piece, because that's what it's all about. The rest of this is all bullshit. And I know it's easy to say, like, and sometimes you judge like, oh, well, easy for you to say because you're not going through it. Man, dude, I've got fucking struggles. Like, I've got all kinds of struggles. Entrepreneurs are always pushing the limits. What I'm saying struggles, like financially, like kind of going through, like everyone, you get this perception, oh, you got all this stuff. Dude, you know how much debt I have? Like it's a game, man. Like you're
Yeah.
kind of going through and you're building. And I think that you get paid. We're going to tangent, but someone said that you get paid in parallel for the size of problem you solve and the amount of pressure you can take. And I think that's totally true. But you know, all that being said, I do this business stuff because I love it. I love the game. I love it. Like I'll never, right? That's my passion. I
Yeah.
love creative. I love taking something like the building that we're doing downtown. It was for sale for 3 years. I'm not smart. Like, and it was like, why, like anyone could have done what I did. I'm just the one that did it.
Yeah.
Now it's, wow, it's great. But I love that kind of piece of the process. And, but it's gives me purpose and I enjoy it, but it's not real, right? None of this other shit's real. It's all about the experiences that you have, the family, your presentness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you've mentioned family a couple times, gathering the kings. We talk about winning in all areas, and family marriage is a big part of that. You've got some uniqueness. Obviously, you've got 3 kids now. They went through some of that stuff with you, but, the scary moment that you mentioned there was not being able to tuck my kids in. Why is that important to you? Being able to tuck your kids in, something so
Well, I
simple.
mean, it was the threat of not being able to,
Well,
right?
right, exactly.
Yeah. And they don't. So I mean, my oldest is 10, so he was, almost what 5, I guess, or
Yeah,
7 when it was going on. I went through a divorce, and I've had several buddies that have had divorces post me, and I always kind of, I don't know why I'm the one to come to advice, but my advice has always been, man, if you can fucking figure figure it out, dude, because it fucking sucks. But I 100% recognize that I was not, I took it for granted, right? I wasn't happy. We didn't fight, my ex-wife and I, but we didn't have any passion or connection. It just wasn't anything there. And I immersed myself in work because I didn't want to come home, right? And when I was home, I was on my phone and I just wasn't super present. And then all of a sudden, when you're on a 50-50 custody thing, time really gets fucking relative for you.
mhm,
So that unfortunately took that for me to be a better father. Hopefully it doesn't take anyone else to that piece, but don't take it for granted. So that time is so much more precious. And that's why I'm blessed to be an entrepreneur, because I'm doing pickups and drop offs at school and doing all this stuff, right? That's there. And you've heard this stat before. We only get 16 summers, I think, right, with our kids. I've started doing this thing. I've only talked about it, recently, but this 4-trip challenge. I don't know what I'm going to actually end up with to try to really make it a push, but I stole it from someone, and hopefully everyone of your listeners steals it from me. Because look, moms are the heroes. Moms are the ones that are the rock stars. And this is applicable to moms for sure, but moms already do so much and have this deeper relationship sometimes than fathers. So I've got this idea where you take each kid on a solo trip, wherever they want to go, every 5 years. Because the kids are growing up at that point. So it's 5, 10, 15, and 20, right? That they go. And it's been amazing. Like my first one was with my son. He picked Legoland when he was 5. This year we did, I mean, it doesn't suck, but my kids are 5 years apart. My wife, my kids are all born between December and February. Like I have zero money at all during those periods. So every 5 years, I'm just like, I need some loans. But the way it's like a 3 month like sprint, like it's the roughest quarter of the year.
That's
But
funny.
my daughter, we did Barbie World and had such a good time. And it's just like the innate stuff, especially like on that 5-year-old level, we're traveling on an airplane together and it's just dad. It's just dad making sure you have 3 meals a day and like getting to bed and like all the stuff that mom usually does. But
Hmm.
that amount of intimacy and connection that you get there because you are 100% the caregiver is
Yeah.
so magical. Like, and we have nights and you do the daddy daughter dance, all those things, which is spectacular. But I'm telling you, 2 or 3 days are game changing. But then they're fun. Then they adapt. Cause like my son's probably knows more about cars than I do at this point and is super into cars and he's a daredevil. And I used to do a bunch of business in Dubai. I still do a little bit. And he picked Dubai for his 10-year trip. And dude, we had the best time. He's very mature for his age. And like we just like the same stuff. So like we rented a bunch of exotic cars and with this got invited to this really cool private zoo and he's zip lining off of buildings and we're eating dinner on the set, like the Salt Bay guy. I mean, just like
Yeah.
the best thing. So like things that you would do with like a buddy. I was doing with my 10-year-old. I don't know where it goes from there. Maybe we go to space when he's 20 or something. But it doesn't always have to be these extravagant things either. But the idea of
Right.
like pacing out every 5 years is that they remember them so much because it's a thing. Like in our family now, like we got back from Dubai and like, Ava, where are you gonna go for your 10-year dad? It's obviously gonna change a million times,
Oh
but
yeah.
like that thing where it's,
Yeah.
I'm getting so much more out of it than they are, but
Oh,
it's gonna be experiences they reach. And then at 15, he's gonna be a different person and we're gonna be one-on-one and having a different conversation. At 20, right, you're kind of going through. So I encourage
that's amazing.
everyone to do it. And you got 5 years to save up for it, each one to kind of, do something. But it doesn't matter about the place where you go. I could be camping in the woods or whatever it is, man. But just that
Yeah.
one-on-one time is just it's so invaluable.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a couple years ago, I've got 4 kids. My daughters are 10, 8, and 2, and my son is 5. And a couple years ago with my 10 and 8-year-old daughters, they started doing daddy-daughter, you know, dates.
Yeah.
And at 7 and 5 or whatever it was when we started, sometimes just go up to the Shields and ride the Ferris wheel. And it cost a buck and they just absolutely loved it. But what you described as the individual time and me being present is what they remember and then look forward to, because they know that daddy's got all this stuff going on and
Yeah.
businesses and people and they know I'm constantly talking. They're probably just right downstairs listening to this conversation, but that attention. I mean, really when we want to talk about commodities, right? Like you said, I've got all the stuff. It doesn't I can't get any more stuff.
Yeah.
The attention or time is what we can't create more of. And
Yeah.
it's funny how even a child can like really hone in on the importance of that. They can't articulate it like we can, but
Yeah.
when they have your attention,
They know it.
man,
They know it.
they know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they're real young, they won't really remember. Their subconscious is going to remember it, and we're building, the foundations of what it means for a gentleman to treat her, or for my son to see a man to do man things, and that's all subconscious at a super young age. But when they're a little bit older, they will remember. But it's for us too. Like
Yeah.
you and me are going to remember those moments.
So self it's so good for
Those are
your
our memories.
kids, but it's so selfish. Yeah. And that dude, that's it. Well, we're not
Yeah.
promised
Yeah.
tomorrow. And I talk about that, but like I asked my father, like none of us are promised tomorrow. And take the trip now, ask the girl to marry you now, buy the company now, extend the product, whatever it is, now do it. There's infinite amount of resource, infinite amount of money, but there's not infinite amount of time.
I think you said it best with, high highs and low lows, but the way you ended it was just swing. Why not?
Yeah, keep
Just swing.
swinging, swinging. Exactly. Don't stop.
All right, that's it for today's episode. Jeremy definitely brought the heat and shared some powerful nuggets with us on how to turn competitors into allies and how to navigate some of the toughest challenges with authenticity and strength. So, to dive deeper into Jeremy's story and strategies, don't forget he's got a book. It's called Without a Plan. It's definitely funny, it's real, and it's worth a read. So, grab it. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and follow along for more inspiration from successful business owners who are winning in all areas. All links are in the show notes right below. Thank you for listening to Driven to Win. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.